my big pet peeves as a type 1 is when someone will come over to the house and they'll be like, this happened very recently, and they come over and they're like, I'm very shaky. Like, I feel like my blood sugar is probably really low. And I always sort of do an internal, if not external, eye roll, because I'm like, you don't even know, And so I test their blood sugar, and it was like 119. I'm like, get out of here.
It might have been too high.
No, like 120. If it gets over 120, that's not the end of the world. But a normal person's is usually between like 80 and 120. 119, you wouldn't feel anything. So it's like, you got whatever you got going on. It's not that. So, stay in your lane in terms of debilitating diseases. I've got the lane for diabetes. Livabetes, which is what I call it.
Livabetes.
It's a much more positive
It
sounding.
is. That is. I never heard of. Yeah.
I don't know why they called it diabetes. It's terrible. It sounds hopeless. Oh, gosh.
So it's
Livabetes.
Livabetes.
Yeah. I mean, I could go till I'm 89 with that,
Yeah,
like
sure.
diabetes, I feel like 70 is my max.
Well, this is a good segue into our conversation.
I'm like, okay.
Because if you don't have the right
Interesting.
disciplines, you're going to die at 70.
Yeah, well, that is true.
Yeah.
It is, but yeah. Right. I feel like whenever I manage my diabetes well, my livabetes, I'm feeling great. And it's like whenever I decide like, I'm going to cheat here, or, eat like a piece of cheesecake, and I don't have my, pod to diagnose myself, I feel like crap. Yeah. So I struggle with discipline. Just gonna throw that out there.
Well, we were going to talk about this.
Okay.
We left off in the last episode, when we were talking about the divided heart. I think I mentioned that we should come back to the disciplines of Lent and the purpose of those disciplines and talk more about that.
Okay.
So this is a great segue, because managing your blood sugar levels, I've discovered, and you have too, takes an enormous amount of discipline.
Too much.
The virtue of temperance.
Yeah.
Got to learn virtue of temperance.
Yeah, struggle with that one.
Yeah. So that we can regulate our appetites.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, well, let me frame it up like this. I think the problem I see out there is that a lot of people look at, whether it's Lent or any other time of the year, those disciplines as a kind of war against the things that are dysregulated or disordered within us.
Okay.
In order to sort of put our house in order, to therefore make ourselves presentable to God and worthy of God's love.
I would say yes, that is probably very true.
Yeah. And I think that that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because I think the purpose of those disciplines is to bring more integration, as we talked about last time, into our inner self, so that we can be more receptive to the grace that God wants to give us. So we become a greater receiver, receptacle of God's grace and love and goodness. Because the more we can receive, then obviously the more in communion we are with God, but also the more He can put us in proper and right order on the inside. So we talked a lot about, self-reliance and the white-knuckling, and we should tackle these problems that we see in ourselves through a kind of brute force or just a sheer willpower. And, so we got to impose all these really rigid disciplines on ourselves. And in my experience of trying to do it that way, it actually doesn't end up working. I can't sustain that kind of regiment. And then when you fail, you feel discouraged, and then you want to quit and stop trying.
Yeah.
But I think it's because we're motivated by the wrong purposes or wrong ends. And I think when we understand what we're supposed to be seeking in all of that, first of all, I think it becomes a more joyful experience.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, I think, it puts us in a position to be more, I guess, gentle on ourselves or more patient with the process of overcoming those shortcomings or those disorders within us.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I mean, do you find that? Have you ever had a regiment and then you're like, oh, forget it, it's too hard?
Totally. I do it all the time. I do it every Lent. I like, I bite off these enormous, I have these enormous expectations of a radical shift. And so, I'll be like, well, I'm just going to stop. I'm going to give this thing up cold turkey. And I'm not honest with myself. Actually, this year, for the first time that I can remember, I actually went easy on myself in terms of what I was going to do. Like I was like, okay, how can I approach this in such a way where these are realistic? Like I can implement this thing on a weekly basis, or I can give up a little bit of this, not all of it, but a little bit of this. Because I mean, if I'm honest, like I can sort of be in this all or nothing attitude, but it ends up every time being a miserable experience. I'm extremely, I'm just unhappy because I've cut out any sort of, enjoyment. And then it's like I fail, and then I feel stupid, and I'm like, oh gosh, I can't do this right. So this year I definitely took a much easier, gentler approach, and I still failed. So it's added sometimes.
I was gonna say it's like so you
sometimes
found some success and you feel much better about yourself.
Some weeks go.
I was gonna call you a wimp, and now I can't.
No, some weeks go well.
Well, maybe I can because you failed again.
I have come to this realization that I'm like, it really is like I have this need for an increase in self-discipline, but I've also come to this realization that I can't will myself. I really do just have to surrender and let go of my desire to control that, which is really hard because it always comes back to this fear of lacking, that for some reason I just feel like it's the fear that I'm always going to lack, like that God's not going to provide for me, that I feel like that's always at the base of it.
It's funny. I mean, again, I think you and I are so different because I approach these things with this kind of idealism. I find there, maybe it's an aesthetic appeal. I don't know, but it's like, I'm going to have the perfect little regiment. I'm going to budget out all the things and all the time and this much time and this, and I got the perfect schedule, but it's like the real world doesn't actually allow it to work that way. And so I get frustrated and then I get really willful, like in insisting on the structure. And I'll do that religiously for really a long time, sometimes years. And then I just get to this point where it's like, I've had enough, and then I just drop it. I was like, for example, with keto, going back to blood sugar, I was really religious about keto and low carbs. Yeah, I know. I have some help.
That's like the understatement of the year.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
But for like two or 3 years, I was just, like I just was uncompromising.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm just like, oh, I'm so over that. Because I oftentimes say this to Lynn, that, there are different goods that we have to attend to and steward in life. And so there's times, for example, a good example with, say, food is if you're really strictly keto and then you go to someone's house to celebrate their birthday and you're like, you're not going to have a piece of cake?
Right.
Like, but what about participating in the celebration,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I just was like, I'm not doing that anymore. So I eat healthy for the sake of being able to have those moments when it's fitting and right to
Yeah.
indulge a little bit or to celebrate or do something like that. And I know that I can bounce back quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now sometimes I think when you're trying to establish some discipline around something, you have to be a little bit strict on yourself for a time and then you can let off. But I think sometimes you can hang on to that for too long.
Yeah.
And it becomes a kind of idol or a kind of a form of self-reliance where it becomes about that
Yeah.
and not that for the sake of which you're doing that discipline.
Like a little badge that you
Yeah.
wear. Yeah.
Right. Or the discipline becomes kind of an end in itself. Like, this is the things that I do. And you're like, but the purpose for those things is so that,
Mm-hmm.
and to go back to the original point, that, is to grow in virtue. And virtue is a little bit more fluid and there's a little bit more elasticity because life isn't black and white all the time. It's not rigidly set up. There's a dynamism and there's a lot of things at play in anyone's life. And you have to, you're always discerning and attending to different things. And so you want to have some basic disciplines in place. But if you become too rigid and too strict, I think it backfires eventually.
Yeah.
Or you miss out on things that are really an important part of living a human life.
Yeah, that it just always to me comes back to this idea of like how difficult it is to find that middle space, like, because you're right, like and this happens with devotions, like where we have these habits or these disciplines that become so everything becomes about that. Like, and so for instance, a great discipline is going to daily mass. Not required, but it's a great discipline. But then it's like you get into this thing where if you're like, oh, I can't miss daily, like, and if you do miss daily mass, you feel like you've committed this like mortal sin.
Yeah.
And
you're a second-class Catholic.
Right. Yeah. And especially if you missed it because you just wanted to get a little extra rest, like, oh gosh, forget about that. I feel like people's natural wiring can like on either end of that spectrum can be, like if somebody like me who is super high in adaptability, having and implementing disciplines, which is like my 32nd.
Really?
It's so low. And so I have a tendency to be like, meh, like I'll come back to that some other time. And whereas my wife, who has super high discipline in her top 5, like she's the one where it's like if we miss daily mass, man, we might be going to hell. And so it's hard even in our marriage and how we live that out because we the dynamic is so across the spectrum of discipline. It's hard to find the middle. It's hard to find that middle space.
Well, and it's funny you use that term because with virtue is always in the mean between the two extremes.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, virtue is always in the mean between the
Did you make
two
that up?
extremes. No, it's an old adage. So you can sin against a virtue either by way of excess or by way of defect. So I think sometimes people can take a good thing and they can hyperbolize it and make it more than it's meant to be. And so you can become too rigid and too structured and too disciplined that you end up kind of missing the point.
Right.
But you can also be too lax.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then everything kind of goes to pot.
Mm-hmm. You can't like do anything for more than 3 hours.
Yeah, right in the pot. Goes right, doesn't it?
I was watching a previous podcast episode where I'm like, oh man, I got to make sure my shirts are long enough because I move
I
around a
was
lot
wa-
and I don't want it to creep up and look like I'm wearing a midriff. I don't think people want to see that.
That would be pretty gross.
Oh gosh.
I,
Yeah.
I was I was wondering if you were going to notice that.
Oh, you could have pulled me aside and. Oh, jeez.
Evelina didn't notice it.
Oh,
Oh,
gosh.
yeah.
Oh, now everybody's gonna be looking.
There was
What's he
one,
wearing today? Is it?
there was one day you were putting something up on the wall.
Oh yeah.
Your shirt was hiking up.
I know.
I almost took a picture and sent it to Becky and said, "You got to do something about this guy."
Yeah. I know it's hard being me. Oh gosh.
That's so
Anyway,
bad.
where were we?
Yeah.
Oh man,
I don't know what I'm gonna say.
it's a great visual. I hope.
No, it's not.
I see a lot of like people out there just pushing pause, like or the fast forward button. Like let's move on.
Too much.
Oh gosh. Yep. Yeah. Well. Anyway, that's me. Hey, I have a great example of like the lack of discipline. You know, I
To wipe my eyes here.
yeah, like
Tears of joy.
I've talked about this. I have such a desire to like be in the moment, you know, like so when like when my family parties, you know, like and it's
Never known that.
oh
Never
man,
seen that
yeah,
before.
and I everybody should experience because it's a really
A Lieb gathering.
yeah, it's a crazy, joyful, chaotic experience. But I have a nephew who plays in the USHL, so this is a big deal. You know, it's like a step below
The USA what?
USHL, U.S. Hockey League.
Oh, HR, yeah.
Yeah, for
I just wanted you to repeat that.
Dubuque, and he also is committed to play for Penn State. Like so, you know, he's doing really well at it. And so they were playing in Youngstown. Youngstown has a USHL team, and Youngstown's only like, you know, right across the border in Ohio. So 105 of my
Oh
family
my gosh, you guys were at the arena.
bombarded this arena. And we even made worked out this deal to rent what they call the party pit. So it's right behind the goalie, and so you can stand along the glass, or they had seats and stuff. I mean, it was so fun, and but I could only stay one night because I had to come home and lead the retreat on Saturday, and so it's like I teetered. I actually, you know, like on some level, I'm like, I wanted to go and just, you know, like temper myself and be like, I got all these things this weekend that I have to get up for. But you know, like you get there and I just dive right in and I didn't go too far, which is good. So a little bit of credit, little bit of mercy and grace for myself. But it exceptionally difficult for me, you know, like in that moment to be like, I got to cut it off, you know,
Yeah.
like, because everybody's like buying beers for each other and bringing a cup, hey, you know, like, do you want this? And there was a point where I consciously had to be like, I have to cut it off. And I did.
Oh, you're so big.
I'm learning.
I love how honest you are. You just you crack me up. I'm sure there's people out there that just appreciate the honesty because they you know, we don't want to readily admit our struggles, but the reality is, and I think going back to the earlier point about being too ambitious with all of this, I think if we're honest about our weaknesses, and we all have them, and they can differ from one another, but the reality is you don't conquer those things in giant strides. You know, you do it in little incremental steps, especially when you're on the level of like venial
Yeah.
sin. I mean, when you're talking about, something I wanted to circle back on from the last episode is, the difference between the venial struggle versus the mortal sin
Mm.
kind of struggles. Obviously some people are still very conflicted within themselves because they have a very strong attachment and they succumb to the temptation to do grave things, and of course, that's a whole different level of things. It seems impossible to me that Paul was talking about that when he was referring to himself in Romans 7.
Yeah.
He was talking more on the level of the venial, just this awareness of the fact that he knows perfectly well what the moral law is, and yet there's this other law working on him inside of his body. And but to acquire virtue, and I mean, honestly, what you just described is a real life moment where the real transformation happens. And the reason why is because it's not an artificial constructed context. It's a real life thing where you had to make a real decision because there were real consequences for it, and you had a commitment to a certain practice and discipline, and you more or less carried it through under
Yeah.
real circumstances. And it's that exercise of the will, which then carries over into the next day when you're leading the retreats,
Right.
where there's a greater receptivity and docility to the movement of the Spirit because you're more properly disposed to what it is that had to happen on Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas if you had just, drank your fill and woken up hungover, and then tired and dragging, you just wouldn't have been as available,
Yeah.
for the good that God wanted to accomplish despite your intentions.
Yeah.
So that's just a great example of why we have these penitential moments in the church where we just put a bridle on the things that tend to run ahead of us or get us into the side ditch, assuming that, we're fighting the good fight and we're just struggling to make progress towards greater interior freedom and the ability to make the choices that we need to make that keep us free and not bridled to, excessive pleasure in this life. And so we have these disciplines, abstinence and certain devotions and practices. And again, it's not because we're trying to prove something or we're trying to, build up our merit badges and have something to boast about,
Right.
or to feel good about ourselves. It's rather, how am I cooperating with the grace of God to be able to be properly disposed to the movement of the Spirit and the work of God in my life? And there's just things that can trip us up and get in the way, and we become too fixated, on those things, and they become kind of idols. I think you used that term last week.
Yeah.
They become kind of idols, and it becomes a little lowercase, occurrence of idolatry. So yeah. Anyway, that was. I'm trying to visualize 107,
105. Well, 105
people
technically we're supposed to show. I
bringing
think,
beers in. Did he score a goal?
He
or anything?
didn't.
Did he have any big plays?
He had some playing time, because he's on the younger side. He's still only 17, I think.
Okay.
So but he did get some playing time. They took it to overtime. They lost in overtime, which was a bummer. But
if they had won, would you guys have just all
we may
gone
have
down on
stormed
the ice?
Who
Who
knows what would happen?
If anybody ever checks him too hard, that would be it'd be like the entire town of Nicktown would empty onto the ice. And
Yeah. Well, it was great, man. There was we were lined up down there in the party pit along the where the players come in from the locker room, to get onto the ice. So we're all fist bumping all the other players on the team, and then he comes by, and the true cousinly love, comes out. So his cousins are basically shoving him as he's trying to walk onto the ice, and his teammates they just thought it was the most hysterical thing in the world. I mean, the GM of Dubuque's team actually came up to my brother who is my nephew's father, came up to him and was like, this was the best thing I've ever seen. Like, it's amazing how many people came and supported him. And yeah, I mean, we were by far the loudest group in the entire
I could imagine.
arena.
That's wild, though. Gosh, if he ever like makes the pros or makes the Olympic team,
Can't imagine.
you have to get
man.
me tickets to
Oh
the,
gosh,
to the
yeah,
next
man.
Olympics.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, to go to even a Penn State game when he gets up
Yeah.
there is going to be
Yeah.
really exciting. But
Wild.
yeah, it's so funny, and we've talked about this in the past. Like, you know, the whole Nicktown. There's a lot of pressure to to have unbridled fun, and which is on some level, like, I love it about my family, but it was the level of like, oh, you got to stay over, you got to stay, like, you can sleep in my room on the floor, because I had a hotel. And
Pressure.
oh man, it was like I felt like that, cartoon where the angels on one side being like, no, don't do it, and the devil's like, you're gonna have so much fun. Oh man, yeah, it was
Crazy.
it was a good time.
Well, so we talked about abstinence.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about prayer
Mm.
and almsgiving.
Okay.
I mean, I it's very similar type of thing. That again, we can go through the regiment of the prayers. Like for me this Lent, I wanted to get back into the liturgy of the hours a little bit. So my goal was to try to do 4 of the hours, including the office of readings would be one of
Oh
those
wow.
a day,
Mm.
which and I'm just like, just doing the best I can. I'm not going to kill myself if I can't do it, but that's the goal. And and part of the reason I wanted to do that is that I've just been enjoying my morning Bible study, going through the wisdom literatures I've talked about.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I want to go back to the liturgy hours with this kind of new set of eyes, for really listening deeply to God's word and what it's really trying to say and how it really applies to my life. I think a lot of the work that we've been doing with Lectio Divina and stuff, I think has helped me to read Scripture more prayerfully and more receptively. But again, it's that principle of receptivity. It's like how prayer is supposed to dispose me to a deeper relationship with God. It's not like a punch list, or I got through all the things,
Yeah.
But am I taking time to really try to be in connection, in relationship with the Lord, abiding in Him and whatnot? And, so I think, when it comes to our challenges during Lent to pray more,
Yeah.
it's you talk about, well, you got to make the sacrifice of time, It's always, I think sometimes it's just always framed in this kind of like self-effacing, self-deprecating way, rather than, it's like, no, that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is, I mean, that might be where we have to start, but the point of prayer is to cultivate a deeper relationship of intimacy with God.
Yeah.
To become more familiar and more connected to Him. And I just, again, I just think that we can approach it with the wrong disposition, and then it's just kind of like, it becomes kind of drudgery. It's like, oh yeah, I told myself I was going to pray the rosary every day during Lent, and it's like,
Yeah.
Are you getting to know Our Lady better? Like, are you able to actually enter into the mysteries of the rosary more deeply?
Yeah.
Even if you don't finish that rosary every single day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I do know exactly what you're saying. And my whole thing for this Lent was, and I've mentioned this before, I like to wind down at night by watching something, just by like zoning out and falling asleep most of the time. But, and again, because I know my limits, I said 4 nights of the week, just 4. I have 3 nights where I can watch my stuff, but 4 nights I'm going to do something that's spiritually like edifying. So I didn't even tell myself exactly what that's going to be, whether it was like just taking time to, you know, pray through. There's like an imaginative prayer app that I have, like that takes you through one of the readings, and so I do that some nights, and then the other nights I've started really reading that book that we're doing for your mission from the beginning. And it's like the thing that I always discover when I do this is I'm always amazed at how I ended up not dedicating this time to like growing my relationship with the Lord in the first place. Like, why am I not, like
What do you mean? Like this time?
because whenever I do it, I'm like always amazed. I'm always
Oh,
like,
you mean like throughout your life? Why have you not spent more time doing this?
yeah,
or
like
what?
why? Well, like why did my evening habit become entertainment and not like using that time to?
Oh, I mean, that's the problem, right?
It is the problem,
That is
and
what
it's
we're talking about.
and what's amazing about it is that every time I go through this process of like reordering some of my time for that, I'm always blown away by like how God will speak to me in that time, like of prayer. I'm always blown away by it. And it's just so it's funny. I'm like, why of course. Like, so why don't I
Well,
why don't I
mean,
commit to it all the
I think
time?
the reality is like self-awareness moment. There's a kind of current that flows through the flesh. It's like trying to, and it's going to default to the lowest common denominator. I mean, it's the dopamine chase. That's what it is. And it's stimulating. Prayer is stimulating in an entirely different way, but you have to sort of contend against the resistance of your flesh, of your kind of like your pleasure and reward centers in your brain, which are going to reach for the quick fix. Whereas sitting down and praying and reading and doing some of that, it requires some effort, and there's some work involved in it.
Right, yeah.
And so you're going against the current. So, like, I think the more aware that we are of that and we know that that's what's happening, it actually becomes a little easier to just say no to that and refuse it and just do it anyway.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we kind of like unreflectively, we just flow with the current.
Yeah.
So, watching a TV show is more entertaining.
It is.
But it's less satisfying. But it's more
That's correct.
It's just more appeal. It's like,
I think also my experience, like I've had a lot of time to kind of experiment and practice what I would call sort of real prayer, like which I would describe as an opportunity to like practice vulnerability with the Lord, like in other words, it's the opposite of what you were just saying, how I'm just going to tack on a rosary, like as my Lenten, like thing, prayer. But it's like if you're not praying the rosary with like a heart that is seeking, like truly seeking to encounter Mary in a deeper way or encounter Jesus in a deeper way, then it's so, I don't want to say meaningless, but it's so fruitless, like, so I've had a lot of opportunity and practice to like be exposed to the depth of prayer and how it can actually speak so much into my heart. So every time I revisit it in a real intentional way, that's where I'm like, oh yeah, it's like rediscover. It's like your best friend from high school, and you haven't talked to your best friend in a long time. And then you like, he calls and you answer it and you're like, oh man, it's like no time has gone by, like you just jump right into where your friendship was and you're like, man, that was such a good friendship, It's kind of like that.
No, I mean, I think it's a very common experience if people are honest, with themselves about it. And especially like if you're not white-knuckling it, it's just a lot easier to kind of excuse yourself and go easy. So, there is something to be said for the willpower, because you stick to something, but in the end it becomes kind of a barren exercise because it's not the best way is to do it out of the motivation for the right good that we're seeking.
Yeah.
Or, and that's always going to be to spend more time with God. It's funny because coming back to the liturgy of the hours, like I was very religious about it for years. I mean, I morning, midday, evening prayer, I had all the books and I loved to flip it open and the ribbons
Oh,
and
man.
the little
Yeah.
white,
Oh, wow.
guide that tells me where I need to be in every season. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I geeked out. I was giddy about it. But it became unmanageable as family life developed and grew. I mean, I just couldn't,
Yeah.
life just wasn't that amenable to that kind of a structure. And I remember
Right,
the Lord
right.
very clearly saying, hey, like this is your first vocation here. But again, it's that if we're not motivated by the right purpose, then it's hard to stick with it, or it's hard to, and again, by sticking with it, I mean like more or less over time, So now that I'm coming back to it, I'm coming back to it with I'm in a different stage of my life,
Yeah, yeah.
and I really always love the liturgy of the hours, but because I just love scripture, but I now I have a lot more wisdom, more experience, a more open heart, and my desires are very different than they were. I was like, I was making a point, I
Yeah.
did all the things. I had all of the, all the rigor, and I did this and I did that, and I had my whole
Like
regiment.
the epitome of an awesome Catholic.
Yeah, I was uber Catholic man.
Uber Catholic man.
But I realize it's like, well, I've got these responsibilities running around me, hanging on my legs, and
Yeah.
wanting me to read them stories, and
Yeah.
have to put them to bed and give them baths and all the rest.
I'm just picturing,
Well,
because this happens to me. Like, you go into a certain prayer and you just want to be left alone so that you can pray.
Yeah.
And then, your kids interrupt it. And for me, it's like I get all irritated and angry. I'm like, this is not at all what it's, like.
the prayer?
No, my reaction,
Well, right.
like the prayer isn't helping me like respond
Yeah.
with love. It's just yeah.
Well, I actually had a very profound experience of that when I was a young dad. Like I'd get so upset with Isaac because he was always interrupting my prayer time. And
yeah.
finally I felt like the Lord was like, loving him and responding to his needs is how you're serving me.
Yeah.
So, you need time to connect with me every single day, but you need to get into the saddle because you got stuff to do and people to care for. Well, I'm now kind of in a different season of life where I don't have that kind of day-to-day have to be on like that. So it's a good time to kind of bring Liturgy of the Hours back. But what's really striking me about it is just that there's just more of a joy in it because I'm way more tuned into the presence of God in the words that I'm praying with and what he's trying to say to me, and just being aware of how incredible the Lord is and scripture and the word of God is. And it's just a very different spirit than it was when I was a young man trying to strive after the perfect regimen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Are we going to
gonna
hear
do?
that? The fan?
Probably.
Oh,
I'll
geez.
edit it out.
Okay. All right.
Anyway.
Dang, nabbit.
It's all right.
Yeah. Anyway, but so yeah, prayer.
Yeah.
And then the last one is almsgiving.
Yeah. That is a tell me about that one, cuz I guess I always imagine it as like giving money.
Well, I think, traditionally it is. It's about taking care of the poor, and I think, I know you and I both do that already, But I take it to be more like well, it's interesting. Let me share this with you. It's like this is kind of honest. Sometimes, if I'm perfectly honest, like when we go out to do our parish work, sometimes there's a certain fatigue that I can head into those experiences with. You know, when you've done the way, for example, 54 times, you know, you're just like, you know, and going to spend this evening with these people.
Right.
And I was actually reading through Liturgy of the Hours, and it was the Divine Office, and there was this little meditation by one of the fathers of the church, and he was exhorting his people to feed the poor and to pick them. You need to literally lift them off the ground. You know, and he was really kind of chastising his people because they were not taking care of the poor in their community enough. Can you imagine hearing this? Like, you need to literally pick these people off of the streets and off of the ground and go take care of them and help them. And I mean, I was kind of struck to the heart by that. But it occurred to me that as I was praying about that, the Lord was like, you know, there's a lot of spiritually and psychologically poor people that are all around you.
Yeah.
And I need you to go and feed them. I need you to go lift them up. And then the other part of the fathers, like this father of the church, I'm forgetting who it was now at the top of my head, but he said, and don't do it half-heartedly, because if you're doing it half-heartedly with a begrudging spirit, you might as well not do it at all because it's completely worthless.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very harsh, and I was like, oh boy, I feel totally convicted by that. And so my prayer was, you know, and I think this was a good Lenten resolution was, you know, I need to be wholehearted and joyful because, and I hadn't seen it in that light before, you know, like I didn't think of the work that we do as a kind of feeding the spiritually hungry and the psychologically, you know, hungry and needy. You know, I always think about it in terms of the corporal works of mercy and the needs of the body and all of that. But we live in a time where people are just in abject poverty when it comes to their souls.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of how I'm trying to be more available and more responsive and more generous in my response to whatever. You know, if a person wants to come up to me after a session and wants to talk to me for 20 minutes, then I'm not looking at my watch like, hey, I want to get home because I'm tired, you know.
Yeah.
But trying to say, oh, the Lord wants me to help this individual right here and now, and I need to be responsive and generous in my response and actually joyful that I have this opportunity. Not only to bless, but to be blessed by this person as they come forward. So I think almsgiving can be, my point is, almsgiving can be more broad than just giving, material.
What does it mean? Is it like, what's the meaning of the
Well,
word
I think
alms?
traditionally throughout societies, you know, there are people that just, for one reason or another, usually beyond their control, they couldn't feed themselves or didn't have the clothing or the shelter they needed. And so it was just an obligation that those people, you need to give handouts, you know, you need to give alms to those people so that they can survive because they had nowhere to turn. And especially like they would often turn up at, you know, monasteries and convents and places like that where, you know, the lady would bring their goods and then they would be distributed. But see, what's different today is that we've given that over to the government, and there's all these institutions now that provide those kinds of services, and actually they do it better than we can. So whether that's giving money to those organizations or whether that's actually volunteering at those organizations or whether that's, you know, trying to just find little ways that you can help your neighbor, you know, who's in need, you know, it could be mowing their grass or, you know, paying their electric bill or whatever. I mean, I just think it can just to be attentive and aware. And I think the value in that is, of course, Mother Teresa tells us that it's through when we encounter the poor, we encounter Christ. And it's, you know, and so again, when you frame it in terms of relationship rather than obligation and duty and, you know, and that kind of rigid kind of discipline, but it's like this is an opportunity God's calling me to experience and encounter Him in the poverty of my neighbor
Yeah.
and to love and serve Him, you know, through His presence there.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's always been something that has been a mark of Christian discipleship.
Yeah.
And so again, in Lent, we restore ourselves to these practices, these disciplines, because it's really a reminder of who we're called to be. But in all three cases, it's relational. Like, we say this over and over again, but it needs to proceed from a love for the other, you know?
Yes.
Or a love of self. You know, like in the case of abstinence, it's proper self-care, it's proper self-love. You know, to have a right relationship with your body and your needs, and not abuse yourself through overindulgence, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
wow. Yeah, that's really good. I know we're kind of running up on a what do you call that?
a deadline,
A deadline.
a hard stop.
Hard stop.
Yeah, we got to wrap.
But yeah, that's really good. I feel like my struggle sometimes, and this is just, I feel like the way I was formed growing up is with almsgiving. It's like, you know, there's like a certain quantity, you know, like, well, you got to be giving 10% to, you know, like to your church, and then you got to be giving certain amount on top of that, you know, as your almsgiving. And yeah, I've been trying to not trying to look at that less as this like defined quantity, and more so as a opportunity to be like to be inconvenienced by giving. You know what I mean? Like, so if there's a meal that we make and I'm looking forward to eating the leftovers, and it seems like such a stupid example, but it's true. I'm looking forward to eating the leftovers the next day, and then Becky will be like, hey, maybe we should take that across the street and give it to, you know, our neighbor who just lost his wife. And there's like a part of me that's like, oh man, I was really looking forward to that. But then I'm like, okay, I'll walk it over, you know, like that to me sort of represents
that's a perfect
more
example.
of it.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. So it's more about being in like the inconvenienced, you know, like being embracing those moments more. Like, because it's easy. Like, I don't want to just give whenever it's super easy all the time. I think it's really more like, that's like pushing in on, you know, like my want, or, you know, like I want to hold on to something, but to give it away.
Well, right,
like,
and that's exactly, like, that's love of neighbor. So again, it's relational. It's like you're building that relationship with your neighbor by serving them. I will say this. There is a distinction between tithing, which is what we give to the church to be able to provide the spiritual services that are given to us, and then almsgiving, which is to give to the poor.
Right.
Just for the sake of the listener or the viewer. Yeah. But yeah. So
all right.
Anyhow. All right. Well,
wrap it up, bro.
Wrap it up. All right. Well, we're almost really getting to the end of Lent by the time this posts, but hopefully this has given you some insights about having the right disposition when it comes to how we embrace these three disciplines of Lent. So prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And, you know, if we do that with an open and generous heart, what's going to happen is we're going to grow closer to God. We're going to have a deeper love for self, and then we're going to have a deeper love of our neighbor. So we'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.
The Wise Guys Podcast is a production of Preambula Group, a Catholic ministry dedicated to helping you thrive in the heart of Jesus. Visit us on the web at preambula.org and follow us on social media.